Welcome to part 4 of supply stations and how they work. We're going to start talking about the stack size filter. This is a really flexible circuit. We can actually just use one filter across all wagons. It's very flexible. If you've been following the series looking for the best solution, you might find this to be the most useful. This is the one that I use, actually. Okay, so before we jump in, all the stations are completely vanilla, but we are using a couple of mods to showcase things. Magic Lamp here lets us take a look at the circuit network and its inner workings without having to mouse over everything all at the same time. Editor Extensions allows me to spread power around without cluttering things with power poles, and Map Editor allows me to control time, advance the game in 1-tick increments. Okay, so let's jump right in. This is our intermediate station, just like in parts 2 and 3, and we're still going to build off of this. We still need to send signals to all the inserters. We still need the demand signal to distribute, but right off the bat, we're actually going to make some changes. So instead of sending the signals straight to the inserters after they've been split into their groups, we're actually going to split the signals into their groups first, and then we're going to filter it. Now I know it's kind of funky, but that's alright, we will survive. So we'll just shuffle these around a little bit here, and then we can paste our filter down, and it looks something like this. Okay, so the demand signal comes in from right here, and then these two combinators divide the signal up amongst the inserters, right? So this one dividing each demand signal by the 10 general inserters, and then this one dividing each signal by, or not dividing, modulo 10 each signal, so that we can capture any remainders and send that off to this inserter. So let's take the output from the filter, and we'll hook those up like so, and we're basically ready to roll. So what's the idea behind this? We're creating a lower limit. So we're going to take a look at all of the incoming signals, and if any of them are above a certain threshold, that will become the lower limit, and we will only insert signals that are greater than the lower limit. Okay? So it starts here. This is where we're feeding in our demand signals, and this first decider is each signal, each demand signal that is greater than or equal to S, the stack size. We will output each of those signals. And this decider has a constant input of S1. So the lower threshold begins with stack size 1. Now these other deciders are going to modify the S signal to increase or allow the stack size signal to decrease depending on the demand signals. So the first one here is any signal, anything at all, even if it's just one, if there's a signal that is greater than or equal to 4, we will modify the S signal that the first decider is getting by outputting an additional S signal, which will get added to it. And so that additional signal is right here, it's S3, because we're already feeding S1 into the first decider, so we only need to add 3 to it in order to get 4. And so once this happens, only the signals that are greater than or equal to 4 will be sent to the inserters. And that's just fine, because they will insert exactly 4, because we're still setting the stack size. So even if we need to insert 5 of that item, they'll only insert 4. The signal will drop below the threshold, and then only once no signals are greater than 4 will it drop down to stack size 1 with the first decider. Okay, so after 4, we're going to want some more stack sizes, so we can speed this up, right? So we're going to go to 8. Any signal that is greater than or equal to 8, we will increase the lower threshold again. And we're going to add 4 to it, because the difference between 8 and 4 is 4. So 4 right here, plus 3 is 7, plus this last one is 8, making up stack size 8. And then the last stack size, the last lower threshold, is anything that is greater than or equal to 12. And of course the difference between 12 and 8 is also 4, so we can simply share this constant combinator. Okay, brilliant. So just for the purposes of this demonstration track, we're only using these 4 deciders, but on the full-size version we're actually going to use a decider combinator for every single interval between 1 and 12. That way we can get maximum speed at all times. Now, before we keep going here, this is exactly the same. It's not exactly the same. It works on the same principles. We're just using different values for the modulo inserter, because this inserter is never going to see a signal greater than 9, right? Modulo 10 means that if there is a signal that is not divisible by 10, it gets picked up. The remainder gets picked up and sent over here. But the only possible values would then be 1 through 9. If a signal with a value of 11 comes in, well, 10 will come over here to the general inserters and only 1 will remain. And then it'll get sent off to this inserter. If 19 comes in, well, the 10 gets passed along to the general inserters and the 9 will get captured over here. So there's no way for the signals to be any greater than 9. So the first decider is exactly the same as the other side. Each signal that is greater than or equal to S, output everything, and we're feeding it a constant 1. That way our lower threshold default is 1. Okay, so the next one, instead of 4, we've got 5. Anything that's greater than or equal to 5, modify the S signal. And then the last one is anything that's greater than or equal to 9, again, modify the S signal. And I've chosen 5 and 9 because the difference between each of these thresholds is 4. So I can just share this constant combinator between these two. And that's really it. We're just adjusting the stack size depending on how big any of the incoming signals are. Okay, so our demand comes in here. It's now going to be divided amongst the 10 general inserters. And so now we can see that there are 5 signals that are greater than 12. There's gun turret, red belt, blue belt, repair pack, and uranium ammo. Okay, so there we go. Now it's being divided properly. Now there are only 5 signals that are greater than or equal to 12. Okay, so they come in the back of these deciders, just like I said. Now on this first tick, we see the output signals are a little bit funky, and that's because the other deciders have not had time to modify this first decider's S count. Now that doesn't really matter because the train isn't in the station and it only takes 1 tick and then it's done. This is just when you first place the print. So if we tick over one more time, the output signals are now appropriate. We have all the signals that are greater than 12 being sent to the inserters, and only the signals that are greater than or equal to 12 being sent to the inserters, right? Just those 5 signals. If I take a look at the demand here, well, if we just look at the output here, rather, it's very easy to see that there are a number of signals that are not being output because they don't satisfy the condition of being greater than or equal to 12. Okay, so now the magic lamp's finally caught up. These are some of the signals that are being sent to the filter inserters. Now obviously they have to break the tie and pick a signal to load, and we know how they're going to do that. They're going to choose the very first signal in the item list. So I can tell you right now it's going to be red belt, right? And it's red belt because if we take a look at the item list, red belt comes before blue belt, so that means that blue belt will be next. And the next signal is repair pack on tab 2, and then on tab 4 we have uranium ammo and then gun turret. So we'll load those items in that order. And we don't really care, right? So long as those items get put on the train precisely, we're happy. So the very first swing from these inserters is going to be red belt. That means that 20 will be reduced by 12 as the inserters make one full swing onto the train. And then the red belt signal will not be 0, but it also will not be greater than 12. So it's going to fall off. It will be equal to 8, and it won't be output again until we are no longer increasing the S signal, because there are no signals that are greater than or equal to 12. Brilliant. And on this side, the filter inserter can easily load all 9 of those yellow inserters, so that's perfectly fine. It'll take care of that, and then it will quickly move to the next signal. Okay, so let's see it in action. Let's get this train around the corner. Train stopped. The inserters pick up their items. We see them swinging into the train. They deposit their items. And now we'll be able to see the demand change on this first decider pretty quickly, just a few ticks in. Okay, red belt has fallen off. It's no longer being output. It is now on the input side waiting to be released when we reduce the S signal. Okay, so we'll come forward another couple of ticks and they're going to pick up those blue belts. 30 minus 12 is greater than 12 still, right? It's 18, so it is still output. They grab another swing. And then they're just going to keep on rocking and rolling. Now we can see the modulo inserter is already done with all of its signals. So there won't be any waiting on that, which is brilliant. And just to drive that point home about the modulo inserter, the other designs are only sending one signal to all of the inserters. So that means that the modulo inserter has to wait until the signals come up before it can begin to load. But with this design, it can just start loading and do its own thing and not really worry about the other side. So that keeps things really fast. But, like I said, this filter isn't at the full size. This is just for demonstration purposes, so this speed, whilst it doesn't look particularly favorable, right, because the index was at about 775, this doesn't look very good, but this will improve substantially on the full size version. Okay, so anyway, we understand how the stack size filter works. Let's move up a little bit and take a look at the full size version. Okay, so the index filter and the max signal filter, it was a little bit more obvious what was going on, right? We had a block of combinators that were set aside for each wagon. Excuse me. But we just smashed everything together. But like I said before, this filter is flexible and it can accommodate multiple wagons. So we've substantially adjusted the layout here. Now whilst this does look like a lot of combinators at the head of the train, it kind of is, but these never increase. This is a fixed cost for combinators. The variable cost, or the per wagon combinator count, is right here. Each additional wagon will only cost 3 more combinators, and these will always be shared. So once you get the wagon count up to, say, 4 wagons, this starts to use fewer total combinators than any of the other designs. Okay, so this looks a little bit different. There's not a lot of constant combinators here. How does this filter work now? Well, the first decider right here works in exactly the same way. It's outputting on the red wire, and it is each signal greater than or equal to S output, everything just like before, and this still has a constant S value. It just happens to be hiding behind this power pole, S1. That is exactly the same. Now, we don't need any deciders because each time we increase the signal, we're just going to output S1. So if anything is greater than or equal to 2, send S1 and add it to this constant. So the first decider will see S2, right, to match this enable condition. And so as we go down the chain, it's going to be exactly the same. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now this might be kind of extreme if we had this for every single wagon, but we're sharing it amongst all the wagons, so it seems like a good trade-off to me to have this perfectly granular array. Excuse me. And then of course down here we have the modulo filter doing the same thing, and we're using the same values as we did last time, greater than or equal to 5 and 9. Okay, so how is it exactly that we are able to use this filter across every wagon? It's going to output demand signals for all the wagons all at the same time, right? So long as they're greater than or equal to the lower threshold. Well, that's where we're stacking on a little bit of extra complexity because the filter is relatively simple and we can get away with it. So the magic to the system is that we are sending the loadout signals, these loadout signals, we're sending them to every single, well, all of the general inserters and all of the chests 3 times. So why on earth would we send all of those signals to the same entities 3 times. Well, the reason why is because on the red wire here, we're sending all of the train's contents, or all of the loadouts. So the first loadout here, we can see the red wire on the power pole is highlighted, and the loadout for the second wagon here. This is all traveling across the tracks. It comes over here to this arithmetic, and it divides it by -10. So what we're doing is holding the loadout for the entire train low for every single wagon. They'll be below 0. And then for each wagon individually, oh, actually, sorry, you can see the red wire on all the chests and all the inserters. They're all linked together on the red wire. But each wagon sends its own loadout as a positive signal on the green wire that is attached to all of the chests and inserters. So that's going to cancel out the negatives for each wagon individually. So these inserters and chests will see negative values for every other wagon except for its own. It will see 0 for its own wagon. And that's important because the third time the signal rolls around will be from this arithmetic, which is taking the true demand. Okay, so that's all of the loadouts come in here plus the negative train contents. That's our demand signal. And then it will send it through the filter. The filter will send out all of the signals to load at the same time, but the inserters and chests can only possibly see positive signals for the loadouts that are intended for their own wagons. So that might sound a little complex possibly, so I have a little demo circuit here. Lamps choose what color to display based on the order in the list, just like filter inserters, right? So red would be first, green is second, and the yellow comes after that. So that means if I turn on this constant combinator, red would be the signal that the lamps choose. And the lamps will choose red because they're set to enable disable, they're set to use colors, and they will be enabled when they see any signal that is greater than 0. All 3 lamps are set up the same way. So if I turn on this constant, even though we're sending out green, yellow, and red, all 3 lamps are red. And so what I want to do is have these lamps turn green on the left, yellow in the middle, and red on the right when I activate this combinator. And I can do that by turning on these. And now when I turn this constant on, the lamps illuminate in the correct color. Okay, so what is going on here? Well, if I place this print, we can see what the lamps see. So each of these lamps is receiving on the red wire the signal that we want the lamp to display. In this case, the left constant is sending green 1, the middle constant is sending yellow 1, and the right constant is sending red 1, and it sends those signals on the red wire to their own lamp. Now all of these constants are also wired together on the green wire, which comes over here to this arithmetic combinator, which multiplies them by -1, makes them a negative signal, and it sends the negative signal to all of these lamps. And so the net effect is the signal we want is held neutral at 0, whereas red and yellow are held low, and on the middle lamp, red and green are held low, yellow is neutral, and on the right lamp, red is neutral and yellow and green are held low. So now when I turn on this constant with green 1, yellow 1, red 1, all the lamps will receive these 3 colors, 2 of them will cancel out and become 0, and 1 of them will become positive. And it will do that for all 3 lamps. And there it is. The only positive signal that they will see is the one that we want, and all the rest are held low. And they can only become 0 when these signals are fit in. Pretty neat, right? Okay. So, what does this look like when the train rolls around? I can tell you that this is really quick, and really efficient. But we want to see what that number says, right? What's our measurement for this? 776. And if this rolls around again, it'll actually drop down to 775. And I forgot about this circuit for a little while yesterday, and it ran for 693 times through the circuit, and it held steady at 775 when I finally realized what I'd done. So it's very consistent, it's very reliable. There's not a lot of variance in here. Okay, so let's look at this just a little bit more. So again, we're sending the negative signals for the general inserters here. We're sending the positive signal for the general inserters individually per wagon here. And then the third signal is up here going through the filter. And so we're actually doing the same thing for the modulo inserters. So we have the negative modulo signals being transmitted here. And so we're just using the screen wire here, which attaches to the output of the filter so that they work in tandem. And unfortunately you have to negate the modulo signal. You can't just use -10. That's unfortunate, but that's what we do here. Okay, so that's the negative modulo. Each wagon has its own positive modulo. You can see the red wire isn't shared coming out of this arithmetic. It only goes to the one chest and inserter. And then of course the third modulo with the real demand, the negative train contents plus all of the loadouts comes in right here, and it feeds into the back of the filter. Brilliant. A couple of other things that we're doing, I want these chests to preload, and so the way that we do that is simply by holding the S signal in the filters low. That way all signals will be greater than S, so all signals get sent out, but only while there is no train here. And so we do that by first using this decider. So when this rail signal is green, green equals 1, we'll output the S input in this decider. And this is only green when there is no train in the block, right? And this is the block, this little teal line right here. No train in here. We're just going to keep this circuit open so that the chests are preloaded. And the S signal for this decider comes from right here. I'm just taking these signals and multiplying them by -25. I could also set a constant combinator in here. That actually wouldn't be a bad idea either. I'll allow you to make that modification if you so choose. Otherwise, you can leave this here and just adjust the value it multiplies by. Also, the S signal is coming from these two constants already, that are already here. 4 plus 1 is 5, right? We multiply it by -25 so we can make it big enough so that when it gets divided by 10, it's enough to cancel out the S signal on the top filter, and it will cancel it out perfectly. And also we've multiplied it such that the remainder will be enough to bring the S signal low for the modulo filter. And the way that we distribute it to those two filters is it's just output on this red wire that the loadouts are on, because the loadouts are sent to both filters. Cool. So what else do we have here? That's our train leave condition when the demand signal is equal to 0, because the train contents matches the loadouts. We release the train with check 1. The error correction inserters, they have this arithmetic just like they always have. It's got the same settings, each signal times -1. On the other designs, we were feeding a positive train signal in a different place. We might have dropped it off the power pole here, for instance. We have different signals on the power pole this time, so instead we've just ran another red wire directly from the station. That means that the signals coming off will be positive because they haven't been made negative. And then it just travels along the same wire that we're using here. Brilliant. That's pretty much it. Yeah, this is an awesome circuit. Like I said, this is the one that I use in my map. Maybe you'll enjoy using it too. So some pros and cons of the system compared to the other systems. One, you don't have to set an index. You don't have to change the clock for the index. So that's great. This doesn't have any issues with a bunch of signals not having any demand, the index would have to iterate through every single item, whereas this just ignores low values or items with no demand. Compared to the max signal filter, this one has next to no processing time. It only takes a couple of ticks and then the updates are done. So we don't have to do anything funny there. It's not as finicky or fragile as the max signal filter is. The combinator count for this is the lowest of all the designs once you have 4 or more wagons. Some of the downsides though, if you had a wagon that was nothing but rails, for instance, so 4,000 rails in one wagon, and then you had another wagon that's got a bunch of signals, a lot of much lower signals, the entire train will be held up by that one wagon that needs all those rails. And the reason why is that will quite likely be the only signal that is greater than 12, and so the lower threshold will force the filter to only output those rails until it's done. That's one downside to using shared filtering instead of having a filter on every single wagon. If you're getting into larger supply trains, like is quite likely for late game builds, because you need to carry a lot of landfill, rails, beacons. They only have stack size 10. You need tons of beacons, tons of modules, tons of miners. You know, if you're carrying all this stuff, it's entirely likely that you'll have a large supply train. This will start to shine, and if you have 2 locomotives, especially on the head, you'll have a little bit more room up here, so you can kind of lay this stuff down a little bit more nicely. This is kind of an ugly block that I've got going here. Yeah, so we're talking about combinator counts. Let's just take a look at how these compare. So this is the combinators by wagon count. So on the left column we have the number of wagons in our supply train. The index filter has 13 combinators per wagon plus 2 that are shared up by the station. Max filter is 10 combinators per wagon plus 6 that are shared. And the stack size filter that we have right here is 3 combinators per wagon plus 28 that are shared. All of these values include constant combinators. Some people care about that, some people don't. Okay, so the green signal is indicating which of the filters has the lowest in that row, the lowest total combinators in that row. So the index filter, 13 times 1 wagon is 13 plus 2 is 15. Okay, and that's lower than all of the other options. It beats out the stack size filter by a wide margin. And then the max filter, 10 times 3 wagons is 30, plus 6 shared combinators is 36. And that is a little bit better than the index filter and barely better than the stack size filter. But now the stack size filter really starts to win out over all the other designs. Once you're at 4 wagons, the stack size filter is 3 times 4, which is 12, plus 28 is our 40 combinators, whereas it's 46 for the max filter and 54 for the index filter. And as you go on down the list, this compounds. But the stack size doesn't grow that much. 10 would be a rather large supply train. So that's it. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please let me know. I'm happy to help. I understand that none of these designs are probably perfectly tailored for everyone. Everybody has different expectations and requirements of their supply chains, and if you'd like to use one of these designs and modify it a little bit for your own map and you're struggling with it, let me know and I'll see if I can give you a hand. So that's it for me. Best of luck.